Hey everyone, welcome to this new tutorial on the Agent Development Kit. Now, does this sound familiar to you? You've been building agents with the ADK, everything runs smoothly, it's able to call MCP, it's able to connect to your database. Wait a minute, it only runs on localhost. And that's the problem with 99% of the agents built today. Everything runs well, but it's all running on localhost. Now, if you're like me and you've actually looked into deploying your agents, there's lots of different ways to do so. There's Vertex Engine, there's Cloud Run, or you can self-host. And the problem is that all you really want to do is to just get your agent that you've built and carefully crafted up onto the web somewhere. But none of the tutorials or documentation out there really covers how to do so properly. So that's what today's video is all about. I'll be showing you step by step how you can get your agent deployed onto the web so that it can be accessed by anybody, anywhere in the world. So if you're tired of toy demos or incomplete documentation, this tutorial is for you. I have made the complete source code for today's tutorial on GitHub. And you can see that it includes the two agents that we'll be deploying onto Google Cloud today, as well as a detailed and comprehensive write-up of how we're going to go about doing so. Now, I wanted to take this time to also mention the AI-oriented Insiders Club. You can sign up for free today, and within it, I provide a deep insight into the production and development of these tutorials. In fact, as part of the Insiders Club, you would have had early preview into what this tutorial was going to be about, as well as a full write-up of the lesson plan. And if you haven't already checked out my full 1.5 hour crash course on how to use the Agent Development Kit together with other technologies such as Google's A2A, you should definitely check it out because it'll provide you with a comprehensive understanding of how to work with these technologies. And if you want to take this a step even further, I prepared a builder pack that not only contains the source code for this crash course, but plenty of other bonus materials. And this condenses all the knowledge that I wish I had when I began working with the Agent Development Kit. The link to this builder pack is also in the YouTube description below. And without further ado, let's get going with today's tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to get your Google Cloud project set up, as well as getting the required Google API keys that you'll be needing to follow along and deploy your agents in this tutorial. So what you want to do is first you go to cloud.google.com. All right, and this should bring you to this page. You go to the top right-hand corner and click on console. And this will bring you to the console page. Now, if this is the first time you've used it, you may have to go through a few steps initially to set up your project, but I'm going to show you how to create a project from scratch anyway. So if you've already got a project, you'll have to go up here and do new project. And over here, you can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it ADK deployment samples. And I'm going to click create. Now, once the project has been created, you should see a notification pop up over here. You can click select project. Otherwise, you can go up here into the top left-hand corner once again, and then look for your project, which should be over here, ADK deployment samples. So either of them works. We're creating a fresh new project so that I can show you step by step how everything is done. All right, so now once you've got this done, you need to actually get a Google Cloud API key. There's many ways of doing it, but I found that the best way to do it is actually to go to Google's AI Studio because it's a lot cleaner interface and it's more direct. So what you want to do is now go to aistudio.google.com and you should be prompted with this. Now you want to just click on get API key, but if just say you accidentally close this too quickly, you can do the same thing up here by clicking to get API key. All right, so while this is up, you can see any previous API keys that you created. I'm going to create a fresh one for this new project that I've created. So you go to create API key at the top here. Sometimes you actually need to start typing it in order for it to refresh. So you click here, and now it says create API key in existing project, and that's what you do. It's going to generate the API key for you, and then you want to copy this and store it in your project. Now, this key is really important. You never want to publish this key in any way. And in today's tutorial, you will see that we will be putting it in two different places. First, we'll put it as an environment variable within the agent itself, but then I will show you an even more secure way of actually setting these API keys. And so for now, the main thing you want to do is click copy. This should put it into your clipboard, and now you're ready to put it into your project. Okay, I've got a project now open up in Cursor, but you can use any IDE of your choosing. I've just created a folder, and you can start completely from scratch. The first thing I like to do when you're working on a Python project is to set up a virtual environment so that all of your dependencies are all isolated into that environment. The way you do so is python -n vn And then I like to name it .bn because a lot of times anything that has a dot in front of it indicates that it's to do with the development environment or to do with settings and not to do with the code or the project itself. Okay, great. And once you've done that, you always do source bn bin activate, and that will then activate your virtual environment. You can verify it first by seeing that every time you press enter now, you will have the name of the virtual environment before the command. But you can also do something like which Python, which would then show you that any Python commands that you run right now will be coming from that virtual environment and not your system Python. Great. So let's just clear this for now. What we're going to do next is to actually specify the dependencies that we're going to need. And we always do so with a requirements.txt file. The only two packages that we'll be needing for now are the Google ADK Python package as well as python.env. And the reason for using Google ADK is quite obvious because we are working with the ADK. And the reason why we use .env is because we'll be pulling in settings coming from our .env file. And let's do that next. What you do is you create a new file, call it .env. And so the settings that we'll be using are as follows: the Google API key, the Google Cloud project, and the Google Cloud location. Now for the Google API key, when you have generated the API key within AI Studio, you just copy it, and then you swap back into your project and just paste it over here. Now remember, this key should never ever be publicly exposed. And the reason for that is that it means that people are able to then run and perform commands within your project itself. All right, I will be actually disabling this key at the end of this video so that my project will not be affected. For your cloud project, this was the name of the project that we named within the Google Cloud Console. You will be able to then see that we called it ADK deployment samples. And so what we'll be doing is that we'll be calling it just that, ADK deployment samples. And finally, for the locations, what you can do is look up this page over here, which I will do right now. And there are a bunch of regions and zones that you can specify. And you often want to pick a region and zone that is closest to you, especially when you're testing. So if you're in Asia, don't pick something in the US. If you're in Europe, you might probably want to pick something that's closer to you in Europe. So the one that I'll be using today is the following, which is Europe West Europe, which is the closest server for me. All right. So with that done, we have set all the environment variables that we'll be needing in order to complete today's tutorial. All right. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to begin installing the dependencies. Now, if you remember, we specified the requirements in the txt file over here. So the next thing we need to do is pip install -r requirements.txt. And what this will be doing is that it will be installing all of the dependencies based on these versions. Now, it's very important to specify these versions over here, because if you don't do it and you just leave it blank, it will actually pull the latest versions of these SDKs. Now, there's a chance that by the time you watch this video, that the latest SDKs will have changed versions, and there might be some discrepancies, especially with something as fast-moving as the Google ADK. So I would recommend that you use the exact versions that I'm using here to ensure that when you follow this tutorial, then you will not encounter any snags. All right, so now that that's done, and you can see the installation has completed, we can clear our terminal. Today, I'll be demonstrating two ways of deploying your ADK agent into the cloud. The first way would be using what is called ADK deploy. This is part of the ADK package itself. It allows you to deploy to something called Agent Engine or Cloud Run. But today we'll be using Cloud Run because I think it's a little bit simpler and it's a little bit more flexible. It's very useful for deploying our API agents, but as you will see in future tutorials, it's also very useful if you are using a Python-based UI library like Streamlit or Gradio. But for now, all you need to know is that the first way I'm going to show you is going to use ADK deploy. It makes things quite simple, but there are limitations to using it. And this is the reason why I'll be showing you a second way that is a lot more powerful that also uses Cloud Run. Now, this second way, instead of using ADK deploy, we'll be using the Google Cloud command line tool itself, which is called gcloud. And the way that you install the gcloud CLI or command line interface, it really depends on which operating system you're using. If you go head on over to this URL here, it will show you how you can install it for your various systems. I'm actually using Ubuntu on Windows, but you just have to follow the instructions here for whichever operating system you're on. Once you have installed it, you should be able to do something like gcloud help, and you will see that it is running, and this will give you all the commands that you need to actually deploy your agent. Now, this is a slightly more flexible way of doing it. And in the second part of this tutorial, I will show you how you use gcloud directly, which will enable you to deploy more complex ADK agents and overcome some of the limitations of ADK deploy. Now let's start off with a basic agent first. So the one that I'm going to use is called a multi-tool agent, which I've just copied and pasted over here. Now this agent is actually from the quick start tutorial on the Google ADK docs itself. If you actually head on to google.github.io, the official docs, and you actually go to quick start, you can see the structure and instructions of what this multi-tool agent does. It's a very simple tool that gives you the weather and time of a certain city, but as you will see, it's just a very basic and toy example that doesn't actually do much. But the whole point of using a simple agent for this demonstration is so that we can iron out any issues with our deployment first, right? And this is the way you should always do things. If you're trying to do something new with a new package or a new library, the best thing to do is to follow the tutorials first, trying to make sure you're able to get the toy examples working before you attempt to try to do anything more complex. Because a lot of times, a lot of the issues come not from the code, but from the development environment, the deployment settings, or the environment variables that you are missing. And so that's what we're going to be doing right now. We're going to first make sure we can deploy this agent. And once you've been able to do this, you know you'll be able to transfer that knowledge to deploying your more complex agents. So just a very quick overview of what I've actually put over here. In the init.py, you have the from.import agent, which is required for the ADK to be able to pick this up as an agent. And as you can see, I've just put this example file so that people know what to put into their actual .env files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to replace the actual .env file. I'm going to take my Google API key that I had over here and pop it within here. And you will see that this is the pattern that the documentations and the samples from Google themselves show when you put in the .env file within the agent folder. Now there is a problem with doing it this way. And you will see later in the tutorial that I will show you a more secure way of specifying keys. But very shortly, the reason why you wouldn't want to be putting keys directly into folders just like this is that there is a chance that you might accidentally distribute this folder and reveal the keys to your projects. This is quite insecure, but for the purpose of getting things up and running, we'll follow this for now. Okay, so now that this environment is done, let's just take a quick look at what the agent does. Now, the agent is actually very simple. It's just called a weather time agent. It's able to tell you the time and weather in a city. And the only instruction that is given to the AI is that you are a helpful agent who can answer user questions about the time and weather in a city so that the agent knows what it's supposed to do. Now, you will see if you actually look at the code that it doesn't really do anything that clever. All it does is that it checks if you have passed in the city as New York, it gives you a hard-coded temperature of 25 degrees Celsius, 7 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you pass in New York into the time, it will just give you the time in the New York time zone. And any other city, it will just complain and say, I don't have the information for it. So like I said, this is just a toy example, but very important. If you can't even deploy a toy example, you can forget about trying to deploy an actual AI agent. All right, so now that we've actually understood what we're working with today, let's just give this agent a run. So the first step you always want to do is make sure that you're able to run everything locally first before you move on to trying to deploy it to the web. So the way you do it is that you do ADK run, and then you pass in the name of the agent, which is multi-tool agent, and is specified by the name of the folder that you see over here. And I'm going to press enter now. And now if you have set up everything correctly, this should enable the ADK to run the agent. It may give you a couple of debug information, but you should see your user prompt here. And the best way to test that this is working is to actually ask for the time or the temperature. So let's go. What's the temperature in New York? And you can see this is not very smart right now. And it's because the system prompt is actually also not specified to be very smart. But that's okay. Let's try it now. What's the weather like in New York? And let's just give this a whirl. And you can say it's sunny with a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. So it's using the two tools that it has, which are actually dummy tools. And it's just giving that answer. And if you try something else like, what's the weather in London? You will say, I cannot get the weather information from London because it doesn't expose them. Great. So now we know that our agent is definitely working locally. It's time to deploy it. Now you can read out about how you can deploy your agent on the docs itself under the deploy section. We will be using something called Cloud Run. I find it a little bit simpler and more flexible for the needs related to using the ADK, but more importantly for when you need to do other things such as a user interface or some other app that interfaces with your agent. So we'll be using the Cloud Run version of this. There's a bunch of instructions over here. But the main thing that you want to look at is this command that you have over here. You run ADK deploy cloud run. You specify all these names. But the most important thing I wanted to highlight here is that you need to pass in -- with UI. This gives us a nice user interface that we'll be able to interact with our agent with. So let's just give this a shot. I'm going to pop this into just an empty text file because I'm going to copy and paste this in. All right, so what we're going to do is that this will be multi-tool agent. Remember that it has to have the -- with UI. The app name here, we're going to call it multi-tool agent app. We're going to call the service name multi-tool agent service. And then for the cloud location, it's going to read it from the environment variables here. For it to be able to read these from the environment variables that we have specified over here in our env file, you need to perform the following. You need to do source.env, and you can double check that this is actually loaded in your environment. So let's try it now. Let's do this, and it does have this. And then we can do the same thing for the location. So very important, you need to do that. Otherwise, it actually would not have loaded these things into the session. Great. I'm going to copy and paste this and throw it into the terminal. And let's see what happened. Aha. And now you see one of the first problems that we have, which may not be the most obvious, is that you can only use alphanumeric characters and dashes. You need to actually specify dashes rather than underscores. All right. And so now let's paste this in here and give this a shot. Now, that's the reason why I said it's really important to recognize that when you're working with new technology, oftentimes it's not the code that gives you the problem, it's working with the tool set and the environment settings that is going to be the thing that catches you up. So it's very important to just get very used to working with very simple code and then trying to get to where you need to, in this case, trying to deploy it, and then you work from there. All right. So if this is the first time that you run this, it will say that you will need to activate the following APIs onto the project. What you want to do is then you say yes, because you need this. All right. So you can see here, it says that billings are found, and this is because this is a new project it we've created. What we're going to have to do is just enable billing within it. So hopping back to our console, and what we're going to do here is just do billing and then our project. And you can see this has no billing account. So I'm going to set this to my billing account. And all right, so that account has been set up. And now we should be able to run the command one more time. Again, why it's so important to just try to get this working with a basic example, because you want to iron out all these issues before you actually work with a more complex example. All right, and so I'm going to yes here to enable the APIs. And if you actually wish to, you could have actually gone into your console, go to APIs and services, and then what you would then have to do is that you would have to go to enable APIs and services, and then you would have to select the various ones that you needed. But in this case, it's actually going to do this automatically for you based on what you need. And there's another one here, requires an artifact registry. Say yes. And very important, you want to allow unauthenticated invocations. The reason for doing this is that if you do not do that, you would not be able to access your agent's web UI or perform requests unless you do some form of authorization. But we're actually doing things for development right now, so it's perfectly okay to have unauthorized requests. But if you actually want to make this more secure, you would actually have to do some form of authorization for any requests that are made to your service. This is out of the scope for this tutorial, but if you'd like to see how this is done, let me know in the comments and I can do a tutorial that shows you how exactly you'll be able to have authenticated requests to your agent. Okay, now this is going to take a while. So what I'm going to do is actually try to explain what is going on in the background. Now, what actually happens here is that you have your agent that you've developed and you are ready to deploy. What it does is that it actually packages everything into a container. So you may have heard of something called Docker, and Docker is a containerization service or app that enables you to bundle your agent in such a way that when you deploy it to Cloud Run or Vertex Engine or any other host that you might want to do so, such as AWS, you can be sure that it runs exactly the same. So what the ADK is actually doing in the background is that it's actually taking the agent that you defined here, and it's actually going to create a temporary folder where it puts all of these things together with something called a Dockerfile. And then it's going to zip everything up, and then it's going to upload it onto Google Cloud. Now, this is all done in the background for you because it doesn't want you to get confused, and it's just trying to make the deployment process as simple as possible. However, the problem with that is that because everything is done in the background, there is a lot of assumptions that it makes about your agent. And therefore, a lot of the things that it does by default are just not going to work for you when you're working with slightly more complex agents. For example, if you're working with an MCP server, which I will show you later, this is just not going to work out of the box. At least I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so the benefits of using ADK deploy is that it's very quick and fast, but the limitations is that a lot of things are done in the background. And so the moment you diverge a little bit away from it, you're going to face problems. Okay, so let's actually just see. You have the logs over here. And so we can pull up the log and you can see exactly what's going on here. All right. And like I said, if you actually look, what it's done is that it actually created an archive, and then it actually put our source code into a folder called multi-tool agent app, which is the name of the app, not the name of the agents. It's put it into a folder called agents, and then it's extracting it into the workspace on the virtual machine. So this is actually what's happened in the background. And then the other thing that it's done is that it's created something called a Dockerfile. And this Dockerfile is automatically generated. And as I will show you later, just make some assumptions about how the project is. And the problem with that is that it doesn't work for every agent that you have. But this is just to show you how this works. So now that everything is working, I wanted to take this opportunity to just run through a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes on Google Cloud itself. We've already talked a little bit about what the build step is done, but sometimes when things go wrong, it's important to see what's going on with your service. The way you do it is that you go to Service and you just go under Services, Cloud Run. And this will allow you to actually see the services that are running. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you're in the correct project over here, and you can see our multi-tool agent service this here running. Now you can actually just click into it and see a couple of things. You can actually see the health of your system with all the metrics, and this is the great thing about the Google Cloud Platform. Another thing that will be very useful is that whenever you encounter errors, you go to the logs section over here, which is very useful. You can actually see whenever something goes wrong. One way to, if you actually look through the logs, you can see this is the system instruction, and we pass through as the instruction for the agent. Now you can actually see a bunch of things. So you're going to see that a request has been made. We have made a request. When we were typing something over here, we were actually making a request to the LLM. And you can see what's going on in the background. This is very useful for debugging whenever things go wrong. Now, look over here. If you go to contents, you can see we sent a request, and then there was a model, and then the request. You can see the contents is over here. Expand this one, and then just expand it again. Go to JSON payload, go, and you will see this is from the user. So that's coming from us, and go to parts, and under parts, just expand it again. You can see we actually asked what's the weather in New York. And then you can actually do the same thing for the payload that's coming from the model. All right, you can see it's doing a function call on the get weather, right? And then the city is New York because it's meant to normalize it. So that's the reason why I wanted to point you to how you get to this page, because whenever things go wrong, sometimes you're missing an API key or there's an error, you want to be able to get to this page on your services to be able to debug what's going on with your actual service. Now, one of the problems with this is that if you are running ADK deploy, it doesn't really give you a lot of information right off the bat. Because first of all, we had to go into Google Cloud and search for the services, search for the logs. Another problem that we saw when we were deploying our agent is that we had to specify all of this by ourselves. We also saw that we had to make sure that we use dashes instead of underscores. And honestly, what happens when you want to deploy a second agent that's called something different? You're going to have to change these folds yourselves, right? So I'm going to show you something that I've done. I've created a bunch of scripts here that actually does a lot of this automatically for you. It first makes sure that the environment files are there. And then what it does next is that it just sets the namespace from the name of the agent. It actually does a sanitization, meaning that it removes any underscores and replaces it with dashes. And then after that, it provides you direct links within the command line so that you can actually inspect your deployment without having to navigate around within Google Cloud Console itself. It basically wraps around the ADK deploy command, but this script that I've written just gives it a lot more information and just makes the quality of life a lot easier when you're deploying. And I'll demonstrate how it runs over here. All I do is /scripts deploy agent.sh, and then I just put in the name of the agent that I want. And this time it will do almost the same thing, but it checks for the environment file, and then it sets all the names automatically for me so that I don't actually have to specify that. All right, it's going to say allow unauthenticated invocations. I'm going to say yes. And the reason why it's asking me again is because if you look here, I've actually changed the service name this time. It's going to call it multi-tool agent ADK service because it automatically creates a name for me. So I'm going to press yes here. The great thing about this script is that not only does it include everything that you will get as part of the ADK deploy command, it actually provides you with direct links to be able to inspect your deployments as well as your deployment status. So you don't have to go around navigating within the Google Cloud Platform and trying to find a way around. All right. And so I can just go and click over here open this up directly, and it will just bring me straight to the page that I need to see for my latest build. The whole point of this script is that it doesn't do anything too fancy, but what it does is that it just provides a lot more information about the status of your deployment. It does a lot more checks, and it does more things automatically for you, so you don't have to keep manually running this and changing variables yourself. I can close this now because I don't need this. I'm going to shut this down. And so you can see here, once the deployment is done, it actually does provide you with the service URL, so you can go directly to your agent as you would before. And now let's try something different. What's the weather in London? All right, and you can see it's doing the tool. Everything is fine. It says it's not available. As we know, that's the limitation of the tool. And if we wanted to debug, we could have just gone straight here, open this up, and it would then bring me straight into this page. See all my metrics that are showing up over here. And then I can go straight into my logs, and you can see the logs from our recent call is over here. So these scripts are not entirely necessary, but it's made my life a lot easier. I actually have included these scripts as part of my ADK Builder Pack. It is a pack that I've created that includes a lot of sample code, tools, documentation, and scripts like these that is meant to accelerate your ability to build agents with the Agent Development Kit. It also includes other things such as how to work with MCP servers and Google's agent-to-agent protocol. Check it out in the link below in the description. All right, so now that that's done, we've managed to demonstrate that we have been able to deploy this. I'm going to show you the alternative way of deploying your agent, but this time I'm going to be using a more complex ADK agent that doesn't just use dummy tools over here, but instead it will actually use a proper MCP server in order to perform its tasks. And what's more, I'll show you exactly how you need to configure things in order for you to be able to deploy it, because ADK deploy on its own will not enable you to do so. All right, so let's get going with the second part of this tutorial of how to deploy a proper ADK agent. Okay, so for the next agent that we're going to be building, we're actually going to move away from a toy example into something that you might actually be using as a proper agent. I'm going to copy over the files here, and it's going to be called the ElevenLabs agent. ElevenLabs just provides a really powerful service that allows you to convert text to speech amongst many other things, and it gives really good results. So for example, I'm going to play this over here.
In the ancient land of Eldoria, where skies shimmered and forests whispered secrets to the wind, lived a dragon named Zephyros. Not the burn it all down kind, but he was gentle, wise, with eyes like old stars.
So that's pretty cool, right? For this stage of the tutorial, once you signed up, just go down to this bottom left-hand corner, go to API keys here, and then what you want to do is you want to do create API key. I'm going to call this thing ADK deploy samples, and I'm going to just do not restricted. I'm going to be removing this key at the end of the service, so you don't have to worry. So I'm going to copy it to clipboard, swap back, open up ElevenLabs, going to the .env file, and I'm going to put it over here. You can use the same Google API key that you use for your base project, as well as the Mouth2 agent. All right. And the other thing that I'm using over here is that I'll be using an Anthropic API key as well. Now, the reason for using Anthropic is that at the time of recording, I encountered some schema generation issues when I used the ElevenLabs MCP server with the Gemini model. And so I switched it over to using Claude 3.5 on it, and this enabled us to overcome those issues as well. So I'm going to pop over my Anthropic API key over here. You can get hold of this by going over to console.anthropic.com. I'm going to log in. I'm just going to sign in with my Google account. And once you're inside, you just click here on Get API Key. I've got a bunch of keys that I already have over here. I'm going to do Create Key, and then I'm just going to use my default workspace. I'm going to call this ADK deploy samples. Just to keep everything similar, I'm going to copy this key, and like I said, I'm going to be deleting this key at the end of this tutorial, but I'm going to just pop this over here. All right, so these are all the environment variables that you need to set up in order to get this to work. Now, I'm going to walk through a couple of things to point out to get this working. So we've defined the ElevenLabs key as well as the Anthropic API key. You can see that this agent looks extremely simple. If we jump back to the ElevenLabs website, you will see that there's lots of different things that it's capable of. Yet, our agent doesn't seem very long or complicated. And the reason for that is that we are using the ElevenLabs MCP server. The power of using an MCP server is that you do not need to have an underlying understanding of the API to a large extent. You can just use the power of AI, LLMs, and natural language in order to achieve the tasks that you want. The ElevenLabs MCP server is the official one from ElevenLabs itself. And as you can see here, it's extremely simple to install. All you need to do is actually just provide the following command. UVX and pass in the API key, and you have access to the entire toolset of the ElevenLabs API, all just through a single MCP server. Now, there are tons of videos about the power of MCP servers, but hopefully this is just a very quick taster of why you want to use it as opposed to try to integrate against a service's APIs one by one. Okay, jumping back here, all we're doing here is just following the instructions of how to connect to a remote MCP server. So you can see I'm just specifying UVX, ElevenLabs MCP, and pretty much that's all we need to do. I would suggest setting a timer of 30 seconds because the default timer of 5 seconds within the ADK is sometimes not enough for the initialization to take place. Now, in order for this to work, we're going to have to make a few quick changes. The first thing to do is that when we go to requirements of TXT, we're going to have to include these two dependencies like LLM and UV. The reason why we need these two things here is that, if you recall, in the ElevenLabs API, we are going to be running a UBX command. It's a package manager with the ability to execute and run packages. And in this case, it's going to be running the ElevenLabs MCP. So you're going to need UV. And the other thing is that, like I mentioned, we are using light LLM because we're switching the model from Gemini into Anthropic's model. Okay, so with those two things done, those are the only things that you need to change. Now that we've changed that, we need to do pip install -r requirements.txt. Once again, make sure you are in the virtual environment so that you are installing these dependencies into the virtual environment and not into your system-wide Python. Otherwise, you can end up messing up other projects or other users on your computer. We're just going to wait for this to finish up. But while we're waiting, I'll just show you. The prompt here is that you are a text-to-speech agent. Convert user text to speech audio files. And I've just specified a bunch of rules so that it will be able to tell me where the location of the audio file is. And you can see here, I've actually specified for it to say it in this exact manner. All right, the dependencies have been installed. Let's give this a run. Remember, we just want to make sure that it runs locally first before we attempt to deploy it. We go ADK run. And now this time we pass in ElevenLabs agent. Okay. And seems to be running so far. What we can do is that we can, first of all, check that it's able to connect to the ADK as well as to the Anthropic model. So I'll do, what are you capable of? And you can see it's actually preparing the packages. And this is what happens when you're using an MCP server with UDX. It's going to install all the things that are required for the MCP server into a temporary folder and run it from there. And that's the reason why we needed UV to be installed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, great. So now you can see the response back from the LLM. So everything's working fine. I'm an AI agent specialized in text-to-speech using ElevenLabs and Rogue. And now we can try the following. We can say, convert the following text-to-speech. This ADK tutorial on deploying agents is great. I won't forget to like and subscribe. All right, and you can see it's going to then kick off a bunch of things. You can see it's using light LLM here, using Claude 3.5, and it's doing a bunch of things around cost calculations. And it says, I've converted your text to speech. The audio file is saved at this location. And like I told you, the reason why is that I specified in the system prompt for it to mention it this way. It just makes it a lot easier. I'm going to click on this and then play it.
This ADK tutorial on deploying agents is great. I won't forget to like and subscribe.
Great. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you're enjoying this tutorial. So now that we know that that's working, I'm going to close this now and clear my screen. And so let's get going with actually deploying this agent onto the web like we did earlier. Now, remember what I said earlier. If you try to do ADK deploy / run, you will encounter errors because of the following issues. Now, the first issue is that we have actually specified requirements.txt here, which uses a couple of extra things, such as like LLM and UV. These are things that are required for our ElevenLabs agent to run, but by default, ADK deploy doesn't take into account these requirements, and I'll show you why. If you actually take a look at the services that we deployed for multi-tool earlier, if you actually jump in and click on to source, you can actually see what actually got packaged and uploaded by the ADK behind the scenes. Now, you will see over here that there's something called a Dockerfile, all right? And in this Dockerfile, you will see that the only thing it does is that it does run pip install Google ADK 1.4.1. It doesn't actually do any other installations of any other requirements. So if you are dependent on using LiteLLM or UV, you will see that anything that you try to run will not work. All right. So this Dockerfile that gets automatically generated needs to be modified. So that's one thing. The other thing that you will notice is that the way that the ADK has packaged up your agent is that it's put it into an agents folder, and then it's put your agent within that agents folder, which doesn't mimic how you've actually done it over here. So all of these things are being done in the background, and you kind of need to be able to replicate it in order for it to be deployed onto the server, just like how ADK deploy would. So instead of using ADK deploy, we will be using gcloud. And I have included in the README over here, so we can actually take a look at what is exactly going on and what we will need to do. So we are using gcloud here. So we will need to create our own Docker file, and I have actually provided in the repository a template Docker file that will achieve the things that we need. So you will see here that instead of running pip install ADK equals to 1.4.1, instead, our Docker file is now going to copy the requirements.txt, and then it's actually going to install all the packages within the requirements.txt file. So this is the key thing that we've had to add into it in order for it to work. Another thing to keep in mind for your deployments to work when you're using MCP servers is the following. In some cases, rather than you being able to specify something like UVX and then ElevenLabs MCP, you may actually be working with an MCP server that requires access to GitHub. Now, one example of that is the Reddit MCP server, which, once again, if you've been following the series, you'll be fairly familiar with. But you can see here, rather than just doing UVX, it actually does from, and then it passes in git plus HTTPS to this GitHub repository over here. So now, not only do you need to have UV installed, in order for you to be able to do this, you will need to be able to have access to Git when this is running on Google Cloud. So the other thing to make sure that you are able to deploy your agents is that you have to add in this line over here, which installs Git onto the virtual machine that your agent will be running on. And this will enable you to run MCP servers that rely on the UVX from Git plus HTTPS paths as well. So this is really important because if you didn't do this, you wouldn't be able to run your MCP servers. The other thing that you will notice as well is that I set the Google Gen AI user text AI to 0 here. This is required for our agents. We've actually set it within the agents itself, if you see over here. All right. And the reason for that is, once again, if you actually look in it, the ADK actually sets this to 1 for you automatically. So in order to avoid this whole situation, you can see that in this template file, I actually set it to 0 as well. This is just a way for you to have more control of what you're deploying. Relying on ADK deploy puts a lot of things into a black box. The problem with that is that when you encounter problems, it's quite hard for you to actually be able to configure your agents to run correctly. Using gcloud, however, will give you the full control over the environment in which your agent runs. Okay, so now that you've got this Dockerfile template, I'll explain how this is used later. But the other thing that you want to do is that you want to make sure that you set up your project location, your cloud project, and your Google Cloud environment variables, which we've already done, as you can see over here. Okay, and then what we want to do now is that I will show you the manual way of doing it, and then I will then show you the automated way of doing so with a script. We're going to follow the instructions over here. We have gcloud installed. We have the Dockerfile template, and we've already set up these environment variables. So the first thing we want to do is create a staging directory. You can do it in a command line. I'm just going to do the equivalent in the file explorer. So a new folder, we'll call it temp staging. All right, and within that, it says to create an agents folder. So I'm going to create an agents folder. And then it says to put the multi-tool agent within the agents folder. We are doing the ElevenLabs agents. I'm just copy that and pop it over here. And then I want to copy requirements.txt and pop it into this folder. And I'm going to put this on the side so that we have full access to it all the time. All right. And then we need to create an init.py within the agents subfolder. Init.py. Great. I'm going to delete a bunch of these things that are not really required in this case. All right. And so what we need to do now is, you can see here, it will look for a Dockerfile, and we just need to copy the Dockerfile template, pop it into the root, and rename this to just Dockerfile. Within the Dockerfile itself, it says to replace this agent directory with the name of your agent. You can run the command line, which will automatically do this for you, or you can manually change it here, which is what I'll do. Here's a trick in case you do not know. If you, within cursor or any VS Code fork, you can actually click here and hold alternate and click here as well. All right. And you can actually just change this once. So you don't have to type plus. So you type ElevenLabs agent, and it kind of changes it in 2 different places at once. Okay, so that's all you need to do. So you can just verify this. Your temp staging directory should look like this. So temp staging with Dockerfile and requirements in there. So Dockerfile and requirements. There's an agent subfolder with an init.py, and then with your agent sitting within it. Perfect. And once that's all done, you can just copy this command. I'm just going to pop this over here. And here we're going to be changing this to ElevenLabs agent service. Remember, we have used dashes, not underscores. These are all read from our environment variables. In certain cases, you may need some more memory for certain MCP servers. I specified 1 gig here, or you can use the default. And then remember to use allow unauthenticated so that you can access your service when you deploy it. I'm just going to copy this and paste it over here. And I'm going to get this rolling. Now, if you recall earlier, I did mention that this is a pretty manual step just to swap these things out. And the other part that's manual right now is that you have to create this temporary folder and copy things over by yourself. That makes things very error prone. So what I've done, like I said, is that I have written a second script called deploy agent gcloud that does all of this automatically for you. It automatically takes the Dockerfile template, swaps the name, sanitizes your agent service name, and it provides lots of links while the build is running. So then you can check the status of your build in deploy. And once again, this is part of the builder pack that I have made available, and it's in the description below. But running it manually like this is also fine. You can see that it's very similar to when you were running it ADK with ADK deploy earlier. And the reason for that is that under the hood, ADK deploy uses a lot of similar things to what gcloud does. Okay, and we can see the status of the build as it goes on right here. This should look very familiar to when we use ADK deploy. And what we've done is just replicated a lot of what it does transparently with what we were doing earlier with the temporary staging directory. But in this case, you can see that it's also included the requirements.txt and our custom Dockerfile, which will allow us to actually be able to run our MCP-enabled agent on the web. The service has been deployed now, and it's serving 100% of traffic, which is always good news. So we can actually just click on this URL over here and go straight to the web app. All right, so now this is loaded up. You can see the ElevenLabs agent is selected here. So we will do the same thing. Hi, what are you able to do? And now it's going to be thinking. And usually if there's any problems with your configuration, such as your keys, usually this is the time where it will fail and you will see an error pop up at the bottom. But usually if it takes a little bit longer than this, it's a good sign. Okay, great. So it's showing here. Finally, we can say the same thing that we said earlier. Please convert text to speech. The ADK is great. Learning to deploy is a lot of fun. Okay, and you can see it's going off over here. And I'll just jump back into cursor for a second, just to show you that. Remember when we were specifying it here, this timeout being 30 seconds is really important because you could see it took a little bit longer than 5 seconds to be able to actually get to this first initial stage. So that's the reason why you need it to be a little bit longer. And the other thing is that this is only available in 1.4.1. Previous versions didn't allow you to specify the timeout and had to use the custom patch to do so. All right, so it's working fine. And yeah, you can see your ADK has now been successfully deployed. It's able to call the tools, it's able to run as expected, and it's converted to speech, and it saved it as well. So it's very like how it was running on the desktop, but this time you have it running on the web. Okay, great. So in this case, it's done the same thing and stored it onto the user's desktop. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to access this because this is going to be stored on the virtual machine itself. What you want to be able to do here is to provide some kind of custom UI that would be able to embed this as a widget somewhere to press play. And if you're interested in knowing how to do that, I actually have a tutorial specifically on how you would be able to create a custom UI, and you can check it out right over here. It explains step by step how you use this exact ElevenLabs agent and create a UI that exposes the underlying MP3 file as a widget so you can play it directly within the user interface itself. But for this tutorial, we are actually pretty much done. I've shown you how to actually use an actual agent that makes use of MCP in this case, the ElevenLabs MCP server, but this should work for any MCP server out there. And remember, because it also allows you to work off GitHub repositories, thanks to this extra line that you have here, and the fact that you have custom Dockerfile with full control over it, you can very easily take this tutorial and deploy the rest of your agents. It's really important to be able to deploy agents because otherwise you're going to just be stuck in localhost and nothing runs on localhost. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to show you, rather than doing all of this manually, I have this script out here, and I'm going to showcase it to you. So the script / deploy agent gcloud.sh, I'm going to pass in ElevenLabs agents. And in this case, like I mentioned to you, this script actually does a few extra things. It logs a lot more things so that you can jump straight into the places in the console to see the status of the build. But the most important thing that it does over here is that it automatically creates a temporary directory for you. You can see it's created a temporary directory over here in the temp folder. And then it's actually set up everything such that you do not need to create this temp staging folder manually anymore. You can just delete this now because it's not even used anymore. This script automatically packages things and puts everything in the correct place. And then it deploys your agent for you. And this script, like the other one, is a part of my AI ADK Builder Pack, which you can find out more in the YouTube description below. Now, one final thing, but perhaps one of the most important things about the ADK and this tutorial. As I might have mentioned early on, in these env files, what you're doing is that you're actually putting pretty sensitive information into your package and uploading it. Now, it's actually fairly secure because it's very unlikely that anybody would be able to access these env files. But there is a problem with this approach. Now, number one thing is that by putting it here, you may accidentally leak this by committing it into your GitHub repo if you don't have a .ignore file, which I don't have over here. But the other thing is that don't forget that these things can easily, like all you need is that if somehow somebody had access to the bucket in which this is actually stored, they're going to be able to extract this and they're going to be able to get all the keys as well. So it's usually not safe to put it in there. And the third thing is that don't forget that LLMs and AI can be jailbroken. If you have this stored in a file somewhere, and while there are guardrails in place to prevent exposure, you never know. When this is defined in a folder somewhere that's included as part of the package of the agent, there's still a chance that this gets leaked somehow. But the proper way to do this is actually not have any of these things in your folders at all. It's okay to keep this one, but the rest of these folks over here, you actually want to make use of a password manager. And I will show you how to do so in Google Cloud so that you can actually just delete these three and not specify them in your project so that there is no chance of these being leaked. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take these keys and just put it somewhere temporarily so I have access to it and save this. All right. And I'm going to deploy my ElevenLabs agent using my script. Once again, very easy to do so. And while this is happening in the background, I'm going to show you how you're going to actually specify these keys correctly in Google Cloud so that you can expose it to your agent without putting it directly into the package itself. Okay, so what you want to do is that while this is going on, just scroll up. There's a nice link to Cloud Run over here. Open this up. All right, and now you want to type secrets and you go to Secret Manager. And so once you've opened up Secrets Manager, click on Enable so that this is enabled for your project. And now once it's enabled, you will see Secrets Manager. So you just do Create Secret. And there are three secrets that we're going to be doing. The first one that we're going to be doing is the Google ADK key. So I'm going to pop this here. And I'm going to say the secret value is right over here. The secret value is right over here. Okay. And then the rest of the things, you can actually leave it as default. You can make things more secure by setting an expiry. But for now, and for the purpose of this, I'm just going to show you the most basic example. So we've got one of them. And then what we're going to do is just create two more very quickly. So we're going to create the second one, which is the ElevenLabs API key. And so I'm going to do this. Pop it in here. Create secret. Create the third secret, which is Anthropic key. And then drag all this here. And then pop it. And then do create secret. So now you have three of them. Now you can see you have three of them set up. Okay, so that is step one. So you've defined it in your secrets manager, but now you need to assign these secrets to your service. So let's just see if the service has finished. Yes, the service has finished. And let's just give this a whirl now. So let's test. How are you today? And let's see what happens. Because now we have actually left out the API keys from the agent itself. We should expect to see a failure here. because it wouldn't have the API keys for the ElevenLabs for Google API. And I was right. You can see down here, there's connection closed. And the way you can debug this, if you go to Cloud Run, if you go to ElevenLabs Agent Service, and you go to the logs, all right, and you just go down, you can see that there's an MCP error, and then ElevenLabs API key is not set. Tool may fail, and indeed it did fail. So the way you want to fix this now is that you go to Edit and Deploy New Revision, scroll down a little bit, and you should see Settings, Variables, and Secrets. Click on that, and then you do Reference a Secret. And in this case, you can use the exact same name just to keep things consistent. So Google ADI key. And in this case, now you can actually select it from the secret that you created. And you can just do version 1 or latest. It doesn't matter because we only have one version. And let's just add ElevenLabs. And then finally, we just do ElevenLabs and you just do latest, and latest. And you can now hit done. And now you click deploy. Okay, so now once it's done, you will probably see this second problem here. And the second problem here is that it's going to say permission denied on secrets project. Why? Because the service account does not have the secret manager, secret accessor role. Now to explain this a little bit, when you use the gcloud command to deploy your project, you're actually using something called a service account. So in other words, it is a bot-like account that deals with uploading your project, setting the variables, and finally making everything work within the Google Cloud Platform. It's a service account because it's not actually your account. And what it's complaining about here is that this service account doesn't have access to the secret manager as accessor role. If you are new to Google Cloud, this is very unintuitive. So you want to pay attention there. All right. So you want to provide the secret accessor to this particular account over here. Okay. Which is very user unreadable. So the way that you do it is that you go back to your secrets manager. So if you click on the secret that you have in question, it should look up this way, and you will be able to see under permissions. Over here, you will see view write principles, and you will see that this is the exact same service account that has been deployed. Now, this is where it's very unintuitive. You try to click on edit, it says role can't be edited as it's inherited. That's fine. What you want to do first is copy this entire principle and click on grant access. And then over here, you just put in the name here, and you should be able to pick it from the drop down. Okay. And then now you need to select the role and scroll down to secret manager, and you just need secret accessor. Okay, you don't need anything else. And then you click save. Now, this is additive. So you can see once you've added it in, now it's able to access it, but it's also an editor. It's very unintuitive because if you go to the secrets here, if you go to permissions, you can see it says the service account is an editor, and it makes you think that it's able to do everything, but you still need to grant access manually to it so that it will be able to access the secret manager. Okay. So this is one of the most unintuitive things if you're new to GCP, and hopefully this tutorial helps you to overcome these little trip-ups. Okay, so you click on permissions again, and then click on that service account, grant access, pop in the principal, and do secret manager and secret accessor. And I'll save it. Okay, so now that this is done, go back into your Cloud Run, and then do a deploy new version again. And this time you just want to just double check. So scroll down again, variables and secrets. These secrets should all be specified, and click deploy. And this time you will see that there's no more error than you saw earlier. If you look at this, there was this whole spec template, permission denied thing. This time the deployment should kick off fine without any error because you've actually granted the permissions. So this is actually the safest way to supply secrets to your agent. You can see it's already been deployed pretty quickly. And so we're going to click on it now. And the reason for click is because everything has been built. It just changed the variables. So now let's try, hi, how are you? And this time we will expect this to spin around for a little while, but it should reply with its capabilities rather than showing an error like it did the last time. All right, say I'm doing well, thank you. I can collect text, and I say convert to speech. Yes, ADK deployment is easy to understand now. All right, and so it's going to go off. It's going to kick off the tools. But once you can hit this point, you know that all your environment variables has been set correctly. What you can see here is kicking off this command is using this NCP server to use this tool that's part of the NCP server. And now it's converted it from text to speech. Fantastic. And this is the proper way of actually specifying your secrets If you look at the samples in the Google samples, they don't do it this way because it's mainly for development. But I would say that you would really want to be in a position where you're not storing any of your keys within the packages itself. If you know any other better way of doing this, or perhaps you might even say that it's actually very secure, I'd love to know to use it and put it within the .env file. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn more about this. But overall, this brings us to the end of this tutorial. I really hope that this tutorial was helpful and that you enjoyed it. I really try to do my best to work on things that I face myself and I wish that I knew earlier. And so if you're interested in the ADK, MCP, and other aspects of how to use it, you really might want to check out my full 1.5 hour crash course on using the Agent Development Kit. It includes things like working with MCP servers. It includes things like working with the A2A protocol. It also includes things like how to create a custom front end that interfaces with your ADK agents. It's just a lot of information that I wish I had when I began work on using the ADK. Don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe, and to turn on your notifications. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else that you'd like to see, but otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thank you.